This video is my reaction and some of my thoughts to the news that John Harbaugh has been relieved of his duties, fired after 18 years in Baltimore, culminating the final game. Unfortunately, a missed field goal kind of sealed his fate, I guess, but there were so many bricks laid that I think led to, this house being built, and then finally Steve Bisciotti knocked it down. I'm glad that John Harbaugh experienced success here. He won a Super Bowl. I'm a Ravens fan for 20-plus years. -2. I'll explain that a little bit later. I want to show respect first and be cognizant of the fact, intentionally, that we all as Ravens fans, right, we have an amazing memory or memories that occurred when he was head coach, right? Ray Lewis's second Super Bowl win. Some of the ways that team got that accomplished, some of the failures that occurred leading up to that moment. And in addition, we watched Lamar Jackson get drafted here. The trade up to select him in 2018, his eventual ascension to being a starter in 2018, a very unusual offense that was utilized in his rookie year, MVP season of 2019, ultimately a failure, 2019 and 2023. But we watched as fans over a 2-year period, I guess maybe even less than 2 years, Lamar being drafted or criticized, then drafted. Criticized again, named the starter. Succeeding, criticized again after a playoff struggle, MVP season the last year. It's been this cycle for Lamar multiple times. 2023 included. Last season, 2024, somewhat more or maybe even less disappointing because we didn't get as far as 2023. Mike Macdonald's last year here. Harbaugh's time here, I want to be respectful and provide some balance of thought on a day when, his run comes to an end. But it needed to. We have not been prepared at the NFL level. We've not been prepared to win a Super Bowl or even get to one. We just have not. The specific preparation for an opponent was not good enough. Yes, I'm talking about the 2023 failure. The opportunity to win the AFC Championship game at home against a subpar Chiefs team that we could have easily beaten with a better plan specific to the opponent. Many of the things that occurred early in the game on the defensive side of the ball, Mike Macdonald's side, of course, were things that you could see happening that the Chiefs did repeatedly in certain situations. We were not prepared for that dynamic at all. I think that loss really was probably, it's something Steve Bisciotti knows was a mistake. The loss and then letting Mike Macdonald get out of the building. We do too, right, as fans. There's a lot of proof there, or support, I guess I should say, for that. And it's not just that the Seahawks are the number one seed. Now, they could obviously lose in the division round in a couple of weeks, but they plug guys in on defense and they just roll on. Macdonald has created a culture there that's kind of Ravens-esque. And the Seahawks can almost be looked at, or viewed, I should say, as a blueprint. Getting rid of Pete Carroll, a guy who had been there a long time, but maybe the message had staled. His ability to deliver the message and also ensure that players received it and then executed it on Sunday, talking about Pete Carroll, has certainly decreased. I think the same thing pretty much applies to Harbaugh. He made the mistake, Harbaugh, thereafter, of perhaps jettisoning multiple talented guys as a defensive coach and then hiring Zach Orr. We were all excited by that storyline, right? A former player who was a UDFA, succeeded brilliantly as a starter, I think 2014 or 2015, maybe. My apologies for that. And then his career cut short, right? But by this time last year plus a week or minus, depending on how you want to look at it, basically after the loss to Buffalo in the divisional round, we knew that we didn't have what we needed. It just was not up to the standard that this roster deserved, that Lamar Jackson deserves. Harbaugh, I think, if allowed, would have held on to Zach Orr in 2026. I do not believe the story that is out there, Diana Rossini, or however you pronounce her last name, not trying to be disrespectful, I just legitimately don't know. I do not believe that Todd Monken was the final straw. She can report whatever she wants to. I don't believe it. If anything, Harbaugh stood up for Zach Orr, and that was the final brick. That was the final blow, or the point at which Bisciotti said or recognized, okay, Harbaugh is not going to change, and he's got to go. And I don't mind being wrong here or saying something that's totally opposite, of what's being reported by NFL professional reporters. Maybe you could hear the air quotes there. Those people, those men and women have access and, 100 or 1,000 times the followers that I do or probably ever will have. John Harbaugh's not losing the Ravens coaching job, his identity, his career for Todd Monken. And the reason, or the main reason, I feel so strongly about that statement is we heard the way Harbaugh talked about Monken versus Zach Orr publicly this year. The way that he would respond, the defensive nature, the tone that he took when asked questions about the defense versus the offense, the choices that he made, Harbaugh, in press conferences to focus on. To me, if given a choice, a blue pill or a red pill, Harbaugh would have chosen Orr. Based on what we've seen him say, the details he's provided, the links, the depth, maybe is the best way to say it, that he would go to criticize the offense and Todd Monken versus how he was defensive, standing up for the guys on the defensive side, specifically Zach Orr the past 2 years. This is what I believe based upon that story that's been reported. You're more than welcome to disagree. I do want to call attention to some of the really off-base, maybe clueless people that are out there. Apparently Ross Tucker's one of them. Reactionary, uneducated, unaware maybe about the Ravens' issues in 2025, but even 2024. There's a lot of people that are uninformed because their attention is all over the place. They have professional duties that take them to different cities, and they focus on different teams every week. That's fine. It kind of reminds me of like when someone comes to investigate something in a neighborhood, the people who live on that block or across the street, they know intimately things that happen, the reasons why they happen. They have background awareness of it. Ravens fans are familiar and acutely aware of the reasons why John Harbaugh got fired. It was not because he took up for Todd Monken. It may not have even been that he took up for or stood up for Zach Orr. But it had more to do with 2024, 2023, and before that than just 2025. Guys like Ross Tucker here who got taken down with the very first tweet by Network Master, who I don't know, but shout out to him for immediately responding, talking about 2018 when John was on his way out the door before. And that was at that time because of the lack of specific game prep. Team on the defensive side not able to adjust during the game. Guys like Zach Orr and Daniel Falele weren't around at that time, or they weren't around, in their current roles. I think Harbaugh's approach to those two issues, the offensive line and the defense, doomed him. The inability to provide any level of transparency or honesty in front of the cameras. Even still to this day, I think he would roll back into 2026 if given the freedom and the opportunity to do so. If no discussion occurred between Bisciotti and Harbaugh, maybe EDC and other guys, Ozzie Newsome and other guys were involved. No idea about that. If those conversations had never occurred in some alternate universe or branch, Harbaugh would probably roll back out there with Zach Orr and Daniel Falele if he could. That's how clueless he is, in my opinion. That's how obtuse he was in the end. And while I am respectful and intentionally tried to lead with that in the beginning of his time here, what he was able to accomplish, we got a Super Bowl out of him and so many other guys. In the end, that's who John Harbaugh was as a coach for this Ravens team. We needed a new direction. I would say, if you told me, let's do it this way, if you told me that John Harbaugh was fired because he stood up for someone that the owner wanted gone for some crazy reason, but John Harbaugh stood his ground and said, no way. This person is too important. And Harbaugh, first of all, is able to recognize who the most important player on the team is, or the most important individual involved. I've kind of given it away at this point. And he then was able to verbalize it in front of Steve Bisciotti, stand his ground and try to justify it It's obvious who I'm talking about. It's Lamar Jackson. Now, if you sarcastically ask me the same question, Bisciotti goes, hey, John, we want a clean house, and we're going to start anew. You're still going to be the head guy. But I need these 12 people, individuals on this list right here. I'm Steve Bisciotti talking. I have no idea what he sounds like. But I need these guys gone. This is what it takes to save your job. You, John, have to go to these people and tell them they're done. Who are the two names that I think Harbaugh would look and see on that list with his eyes? Full stop, stand up immediately and defend, and want back in 2026? Man, I can't lie. Zach Orr and Daniel Falele. That's how ridiculous that situation was. Those two situations were, in my opinion. He was that obtuse. He was that hard-headed. And both of them, I think, would have persisted into 2026. And so for that reason, I'm not glad that a person, a family, has to move on. He's going to get paid. But I feel some level of contentment because he professionally miscalculated twice. Harbaugh doubled down, tripled down. In fact, the front office is involved as well. I've spoken about my feelings or evaluations ad nauseum, and so I recognize that to a certain degree, we're beating a horse that's already left town here, right? Ultimately, the focal point for me moving forward has to be how does our decision, how does this next decision and the one after that affect Lamar Jackson? Number one, we need a head coach that calls plays on one side of the ball or can do so if need be. I do not get the sense that Harbaugh could, can, or would because he never has. Were there times where he was involved with the offense? Absolutely. I think he probably was during the Green Bay game. You could look at the style of plays that were called. They did not look like Todd Monken plays, if you will. In terms of who we could go get, if you could rewind time a year, I'd prefer a young offensive guy with talent, like a Ben Johnson, right? This year, that would be a Clint Kubiak, I guess. I'm just talking about archetypes, right? Maybe a strong defensive coordinator force, someone who's brilliantly prepared, incredibly talented, and has got the right touch during the game at calling plays, and also has found a way to, overcome injuries, plug guys in, and succeed on a weekly basis. Yeah, I'm talking about that guy, Mike McDonald, right? Who is that person in this cycle of hiring head coaches? I mean, it's Brian Flores. But there are issues there beyond the field and his coordination. I do like a couple of dynamics there that I will mention. I'm not saying that he's my guy, but first of all, this one's a little ironic. Post-Miami head coach debacle for Brian Flores, he spends a year in Pittsburgh 2022. Credit to Mike Tomlin for pulling him in there. People have different theories about why, how that occurred. Was it a favor to the league? Did the league instruct the Steelers to do it? Who knows? Flores spent one season there, 2022, moved on to Minnesota as the defensive coordinator. I like the irony there that he spent a season under, our biggest rival for the division, Tomlin. And so I wonder what that dynamic would be like if Flores became the head coach and had to go against him. I'll tell you three reasons, like I said, why I like that option, independent of the issues with the lawsuit or Flores' history of being abrasive or difficult to deal with, or he didn't like Tua, whatever. Number one, he worked with Tomlin, like I said. Thanks, Mike. You talked to the guy about your procedures and advice, and we can maybe use some of that against you. Who knows? He's also a genius, Flores, at the mug looks, the simulated pressure. And he'd be perfect, man, to have in camp to help our offense deal with those types of looks. Kind of a full circle moment or alignment, I guess, because, that Thursday night football game down in Miami, 2021, Flores calls the mug look, simulated pressure, blitz zero, whatever, 37, 38 times. And he could absolutely help us not struggle there. And I don't mean Lamar at all. I mean our O-line operation, the way we cycle through our options on offense, how to get the ball out to the right place in that specific look that teams can give us. Really, for me, though, what's more important than those first 2 points is Flores goes, and I'll move on from him. I'm just telling you the things I like about a particular guy. You could substitute or fill in the blank Chris Shula, Jesse Minters, Clint Kubiak, and the details, the 3 that I'm listing, I've done 2 so far, I'll do a third in a moment, they would be different, right? I'm just listing out possible strengths that we should hope for in the next head coach. The one that I like for Flores, he's no nonsense, headstrong, appears to hold people accountable. Now, the last part of that, I think it's more important that the next head coach holds himself accountable. I don't think Harbaugh did a great job there at all in the last couple of years. Not sold on Flores being the guy. He's got distinct strengths, and we think of it like a Madden player ranking, right? Speed, agility, strength, catching, awareness, all of those things. Flores has got distinct strengths. So do other guys. Joe Brady, Chris Shula, Clint Kubiak, Jesse Minters. A guy that I think is interesting, I'm not going to say that I'm rooting for him, someone that I hope at least gets an interview is Lou Anarumo, the Colts DC. He's probably gone from being a legitimate candidate as an NFL head coach, but he's got a unique style and found him to always be interesting with what he does on defense. There's a ton of other guys out there that I don't want to root against a human being to not get an interview, but two guys that would test my fandom for the Ravens if they were to get hired. Dabo and Stefanski. Not a huge fan at all. A third that I would not prefer, but would be supportive of if it happened, and that's Anthony Weaver. I would say he was way further down my list, and that's why I mentioned him last. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to align a coach and their vision with our roster and the contracts that we've committed to, right? And larger picture, someone who can hold the locker room's attention, hold people accountable, while doing that for himself, and I do mean publicly. That allows you to control people is not the right word. That allows you to lead people because you've demonstrated you've got the same high standards for yourself that you do for everyone else who's involved, player, coach, etc. I think that last aspect right there ended up being a real relative weakness for John Harbaugh in the end. Now, having said that, we've already seen tweets and social media posts out there that John Harbaugh's got 42 teams lined up to interview him for their head coaching job, and he won't even have enough time to work through all the opportunities. That's great. Congratulations. I will say this. I think Bisciotti made the right move. I suspect that at some point Harbaugh will come out with a very classy statement, one that ensures that he credits the people that should be credited. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, of course, Monken, Zach Orr, among others. I think something that was mentioned to me by EA, Edgar Allen, and we'll hopefully talk about Wednesday on Inside the Coverage, is this brings a little bit of fire to Eric DeCosta. You know, he's a part of what has happened here, the drafting. I'm tired. It is not the position player's job, nor should it be, to make your third-round pick or your fourth-round pick. The whole, red star, blue square, green rectangle, just rate them highly. We should be done as a general manager with drafting guys because of position coach. Look, position coaches move around every 2, 3, 4 years anyway, sometimes more frequently than that. Just because a position coach thinks we should take them or assigned a red star to them, whatever the heck it is, I don't care. It's your job as the GM to listen to their input, take that into account, but more importantly, the needs of the roster and the whole BPA, best player available, at every point during the draft, that has failed us. First round, second round seems to be good in my opinion. I don't have time to necessarily go back and listen to my draft evaluation after the 2025 draft, but I'm going to try to do so on a drive down and then back to an important location that I have to go to in the next 2 or 3 days for the 2025 draft and 2024 to hear what I myself had to say because I don't remember. I just know this. We have not done a good job addressing the needs of the roster in a targeted fashion through the draft. And yes, for the 1,000th time, I'm talking about the offensive line. We have historic talent in the backfield. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. We needed a better offensive line to take advantage of that. Todd Monken, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. You could give them any two tight ends, any two wide receivers, and a healthy and available Pat Ricard. And if you give that group a top 5 O-line, they're going to get things done. We were terrible in 2025. John Harbaugh doubled, tripled down on that offensive line group. Look, the 2024 plan wasn't great. Pat McCarry and Daniel Falele. It was worse, perhaps, in 2024 because you didn't know what Falele was or was not capable of. This past season, the one that ended with an 8-9 record, Voorhees and Falele was not a solid plan at all. That's on Harbaugh. It's also on Eric DeCosta. And as of right now, when I record this, he's still here. So when I say it holds his feet to the fire a little bit, I mean it. No idea who the next O-line coach is. This current one, or the one that just left, I guess Warhop, he had a great career. He did not leave a lasting impression here on me. I'm sure that 10, 12, 14 years ago, maybe he was a better, more productive offensive line coach, in my opinion. 2024, 2025, Lamar Jackson deserved better. That's a failure of whatever the hierarchy is. EDC down to Harbaugh, down to the offensive line coach. Somewhere in that those levels there is Todd Monken, perhaps an offshoot to the side. Derrick Henry certainly deserves better after he took less money to come here and then ran for 1,900 yards in 2024. Of course, that got him a raise, right? I think, seriously, this should alert EDC. If you ask me, the plan has not been good enough. It hasn't been safeguarded, especially in 2025. Yeah, the schedule was difficult. Congratulations. And we had some injuries. So did other teams. They made huge mistakes with the offensive line plan. John Harbaugh refused to create any competition. And so from that standpoint, I think that Bisciotti did the right thing. Even this past season, an example, our 4th and 5th round draft pick situation, right? I think we traded back, then drafted Buchanan, maybe traded back a second time. Maybe I have the order wrong there. And we took Carson Vincent. That was laughably bad in light of the fact that, number one, the defensive tackle draft was deep. Tonka Hemingway, I think, gets drafted in between Buchanan and Vincent. He had 4 sacks in 9 games for the Raiders this year. Where would 4 sacks have put Tonka Hemingway on the Baltimore Ravens statistical ledger in 2025? We've had an inconsistent nature to what we have done during the draft in recent years. This one coming up, I don't think we need 6 or 16 or 26 fifth-round picks. I know that's an exaggeration. We don't need all that. We don't need half that. We may not even need a third of that. I get it. We do want and have to acquire cheap talent, right, to offset our other salaries. And this is going to be a point that I'll kind of roll into one of the last two. And that's, as far as the salary allocation, we've got so much on the defensive side. I think the next head coach, whoever it is, even if it's a Flores defensive guy, Freeman from Notre Dame defensive guy, more money, more resources has to be allocated to the offensive side. I don't know what the percentage is. Again, I believe with a top 5 offensive line, Todd Monken, Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, any 2 wide receivers on our roster, any of our top 4, I should say, any of our top 3 receivers, any 2 of our top 3, we're going to score 30 points a game. In this year. I'm talking this past year that just ended. Even with Zach Orr's difficulties on the defensive side. Harbaugh's inefficiency. Harbaugh being obtuse, incapable, unwilling to hold the defense accountable. Maybe even you could go as far as to say he's not commanding the respect in the locker room. I don't know. Even with all those things occurring, a top 5 offensive line this past year, with Monken, Lamar, and Henry on the field consistently, we score 30 points a game. That's my thought. That's what I think. Time and space for Lamar and space for Henry to make cuts. We get things done consistently, and we probably win 10, 11, 12 football games, maybe even as much as 13. Schedule was very difficult, I know. You can argue if you want, but let me phrase it to you this way, tell you my justification. How do you stop Lamar Jackson if he has time and space to decide, where to throw, whether to throw or scramble, but where to throw the football? And then Derrick Henry, building off of that. I don't think you do. We were a bottom 10 offensive line this year. That's as high as I'm willing to go. If you think otherwise, hey, Coach, I think this is an average offensive line. We're middle of the pack. You can go on and get your info or your content from wherever it is that you go so that someone tells you what you want to hear. You can't watch that Steelers game on Sunday night and see Lamar navigate what he did at times in the pass game and support that. You cannot. Go find your data wherever you want to. You're grabbing at straws. That offensive line has never been strong enough in 2024 and 2025 to get things done against the better teams. I think the house, the whole foundation, is Lamar. We should build to him, not build upon him. Meaning, do not expect him to be this energetic force of nature on every single play. When we have Derrick Henry, Henry can handle the workload. He's shown that since the Rams game, I think in week 6. He was able to carry the football a ton the last 2 or 3 weeks. I will make a point here that's something that I've thought maybe brought up a little bit in the Discord. You get a lot of these stories that come out that are from sources. They are unprovable. We got one a couple of weeks ago, right, from Mike Preston. Like, how can you prove that Lamar Jackson was sleeping in meetings? Well, first of all, he wasn't, so you can't prove it, but you can't disprove it either. One thing that's interesting to me, how come we didn't get stories the last 2 years about Ravens coaches or players being pissed about the offensive line, angry about the defensive organization or the defensive dysfunction, right? The lack of organization. I guess we got Marcus Williams talking once he was gone. My point is, where are these like shady backroom stories that have been fed to reporters about the offensive line, about the defense? No, we get them about our quarterback falling asleep in meetings. Like, get the fuck out of here. The shift has to be next. It has to be next. More focus on the offense. Change the approach from the draft. Don't just do things the Ravens way, independent or almost ignorant of the strength of the draft. Yeah, I'm talking about the defensive tackle depth in this last draft. Maybe the Ravens' evaluation of the defensive tackles wasn't as good as everyone else's. Maybe the Ravens were wrong. And we shouldn't have been playing games late 4th round into the 5th round and taking an inside linebacker that we didn't need, a backup tackle that we didn't need. I want someone, whether it's Kubiak, Joe Brady, Flores, Kurt Signetti, whoever, someone who will value the offense properly, given the opportunity that they have. When I say they, I mean the next head coach. We've got film from 2025 of Derrick Henry being a monster. I think we'll get a similar version in 2026. How long can that extend? It can't be very much longer. But look at how amazing it's been in 2 seasons in Baltimore. 3,516 rushing yards. Just 32 touchdowns for Derrick Henry. One guy. There's teams that haven't done that in the past 2 years. 5.56 yards per carry. We're basically taking the 2024 and 2025 numbers, smashing them together, giving you the average. And that's with Lamar missing, I think, 31% of the snaps this year. I'll actually show that tweet here. I'm not sure who this guy is. Shane Haff, I guess, mentions that what Monken was able to do, kind of related to the point that I talked about earlier, with Lamar missing a high percentage of the snaps. I think that's pretty amazing. I would not have guessed it was 31%, but it makes sense. In my opinion, we should be more focused on the offense than in recent years. And maybe I myself haven't been on that train enough in terms of my draft evaluation, my predictions, or the things I wanted the Ravens to do. Like I said, 3,500 rushing yards for Henry, 32 touchdowns. Look, compare that, look it up yourself, to it's historic 2019 and 2020 seasons packaged together. Those two seasons together, right? One of those, by the way, was his 2,000-yard, 17-touchdown season of 2020. I think he's AP Offensive Player of the Year that season. He was 25 and 26 those 2 years, 19 and 20. He just matched, basically, that two-season output in Baltimore at age 30 and 31. I think we should maximize that for next year, 2026. You're not going to do that with this offensive line. You certainly were not going to do that with John Harbaugh and George Warhop around. Maybe that was the sticking point with Todd Monken. We got to get someone serious in here, an O-line expert. Now, yesterday, really, we do have requisite position player talent on offense. We've got more than enough position player talent. Bateman signed, disappointing year this season, obviously. Flowers, year 4 coming up. Andrews re-signed, extended for whatever reason. Re-signing Isaiah Likely, I think getting him here for at least another year is a good idea for the next head coach. Is this draft strong in the offensive line? I don't know. It's too soon for that for me. I'm not going to accept some other person's opinion or initial impression that's out there just because they have access to NFL Network or PFF or whatever the thing is that I don't. I'm going to watch the film. I'm going to make a Google Drive just like I did last 2 drafts. Put it out there so you can see yourself if you want. The amount of shit that I've cut up from a film standpoint. And I'll use that to make up my own mind, and I'll tell you what I think. I may be wrong, but I know this. I will not be as wrong as we were in thinking that this offensive line for 2025 was going to get the job done. Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh miscalculated, and they mistrusted George Warhop. Whoever the next head coach is, / offensive coordinator, they got to find a way to get the best possible O-line out there in front of Lamar Jackson, in front of Derrick Henry. We got a lot to figure out for whoever that guy is or whoever those people are, right? Lamar Jackson's contract. Other guys got big numbers to navigate, for sure. You got Matabike, Humphrey, Roquan Smith. Of course, all of those are, defensive guys. Kind of speaks to my point that we need more salary allocated or dedicated to the offense in a way that promotes a quick turnaround. You can witness or refer to what Ben Johnson did in Chicago. Of course, they drafted Luther Burden. They also drafted a tight end, Loveland. Drafted a tackle, I think Trapillo. I don't even know that he's starting necessarily, but he went out and they got 2 guards and a center. Serious talent upgrade along the offensive line, and Ben Johnson did that before his first season as a head coach. John Harbaugh went into year 18, this one that just ended on Sunday, with Daniel Falele and Voorhees as his guards. Ben Johnson brought in Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. You can turn around the O-line in 1 year in a dramatic way if you want to. I don't know who the offensive-minded head coach is to bring in. Maybe Bisciotti goes rogue and he brings in Flores and Gruden at the same time. I'm obviously joking, but we need someone who recognizes the need to not protect Lamar Jackson, but the need to give him as much time and as much space to execute. Maybe that fits, Curt Cignetti, the Indiana coach. He's got an offensive coordinator, ironically named Mike Shanahan, no relation that I'm aware of, who played receiver. Those two moved from James Madison to Indiana together. I actually know that because of a personal reason. Some people that I know that were recruited by those guys. I have no idea where Bisciotti's going to go. Eric DeCosta and Ozzie certainly involved. I do know this. Eric DeCosta has been spending Steve Bisciotti's money, presumably with his approval, right? You've got college guys that I think will want to move up at some point. Freeman, Signetti, they're stars at this point. It really doesn't matter to me who it is. We had to move on. We needed to move on. This is step one. I suspect Bisciotti recognized during the season of 2024. I don't know him at all. I know people who do know him, that went to college with him and know him quite well. I suspect that he's smart enough to have recognized during 2024 that he made the wrong choice. Basically, the window to bring McDonald back post-2023 was missed, and we made a mistake with Zach Orr. Harbaugh, I think, it's my opinion, I made it clear earlier, that Harbaugh was going to stand his ground for Zach Orr, not for Todd Monken. I could be absolutely wrong. This is, I think, one of the best jobs out there right now for a head coach because of Lamar. Derrick Henry, too. Kyle Hamilton as well, right? And others. You've also got the dynamic of this fan base that is, they're excited. We should be. To move on and to move into some new frontier. We were almost there in 2018. That's the thing about the Tucker tweet, the Ross Tucker tweet. I didn't expand upon it earlier. That's the thing that's so, laughable about his perspective here. He's trying to be snarky. He's trying to get replies. I'm sure that it worked. You can see he's got 100,000 views and a whole bunch of retweets, etc. I bookmarked it because I thought about commenting and then I just chose not to. My point is, guys like that don't have the ability to think about anything other than today or this season for that matter. Hey, jackass, we were ready to get rid of this guy in 2018, and Lamar Jackson, in an extremely unusual offense at the time, we switched offenses in the middle of the year, did, in fact, save his job. I was fortunate to get someone to hand me, basically, film of the 2018 season. I have it to look at some point during the offseason, maybe do some film study stuff on YouTube or just, share it in my Discord and such. I know this. Lamar and some of our other guys are hopefully excited. I know they respected Coach Harbaugh and had some good times together. Close to a Super Bowl bid in 2023, right? But we needed someone with a fresh new plan and someone who didn't take the opportunity for granted. I never got the sense from John Harbaugh, 2024 and 2025, that he looked at every game, every week, as this new opportunity that he could sell to the guys, the players, as something they needed to dedicate everything to. My analogies probably aren't any good. Maybe the best ones are NBA or MMA ones. I feel like Harbaugh is a guy who had a good career in music. And then later in his career, when he was considered, 1 foot out the door or maybe even 2, was fortunate to do a collaboration with a genius. And that record, that collaboration they did together, hit it big. And that spurred or kickstarted another 4 or 5 years of appearances, maybe tours, just revenue, right, that had previously dried up. Of course, Lamar is the guy that prolonged Harbaugh's career. But I also understand that there'll be people who say, hey, Coach, Lamar had the success in Baltimore. Maybe he doesn't have that in 2018, 2019 in New York or Charlotte or, other NFL cities. I'm open to all that. But I remember the stages of Lamar. We've all been there. Look, I will tell you why it's so important to me and the reason why I started to do Ravens content. When they drafted Lamar, the whole storyline leading up to the draft, that reignited my fandom. I will be honest with you. I had not watched a Ravens game in 2 years at that point. Multiple reasons. The first two of which, I was coaching youth football and coaching youth track. Pretty much the same group of kids moving up with them. 11 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old. They went on to high school. That was it. So there was partially a reason for that. But Lamar really reignited my fandom. And at the end of the 2018 season, I think, is when I started to watch Coach Evans' videos, Sip to Tally, and try to comment on them. And then one day thought, okay, I'm going to try to do this myself. So watching him go through the stages he's gone through, return from the playoff failure in 2018, win an MVP, He should have 3 MVPs at this point. I think what we all want as fans, and what Lamar needs, is to cap this thing off. And that's a Super Bowl trophy, along with the 2 or 2.5 MVPs, however you want to describe it. Credit to Steve Bisciotti. He correctly recognized, realized, and then acted upon the truth, which is that John Harbaugh was not going to get him, Bisciotti or Lamar. He wasn't going to get them any closer to a Super Bowl 1 year from now, or extending onward, towards the end of Lamar's next contract, which isn't even signed at this point. I don't really care about the Lamar Harbaugh dynamic, to be honest with you. I suspect they have a better relationship than others are putting out there. I tend to take the things Lamar says at face value. I seem to be naive here in that accepting that he's a pretty straightforward guy. I like the fact that he's a different kind of cat, that he's a different kind of player who doesn't have an agent and is willing to stand on his own 2 feet. And he certainly, gets undercut for that, most recently by Mike Preston and the Baltimore Sun. In any case, I think we've got the right move here, moving onward in some new direction. We don't know yet where we're going, away from John Harbaugh. Wish Harbaugh luck in his next city. New York would certainly be interesting. But you guys are welcome to let me know what you think of my thoughts here. Maybe I drug it on a little bit, but I typed some of it out and then tried to expand upon it with my own thoughts. It's been a whirlwind 2025 season, one that drama-wise we thought was over. Wrong. Here we are now. Bisciotti lets go of Harbaugh, and there's a lot of uncertainty, but hopefully excitement as well. Appreciate you guys' time, and if you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comment section, number 1. Finally, if you think other Ravens fans would like to hear my thoughts on the matter, please consider grabbing a link to this video and then sharing it out on social media so other Ravens fans can enjoy it as well. Appreciate you guys' time.